So good afternoon po sa ating lahat. Welcome to panel 6. So yung panel 6 po natin is entitled Indigenous Health Benefits and Practices. My name is Grishal Miklay. I am from UP Baguio and I will be your moderator for this panel. We also have in this room Paula Pamintuan Riva, who is our assistant moderator. So if you have any technical concerns, please direct your message to her. Alright, so a brief reminder lang po sa ating mga participants kahit na na-encounter nyo na to sa previous panels natin, please mute your microphones if it's not yet your turn to speak. Okay, so ando dun po sa ating conference kits yung ating do's and don'ts sa ating mga Zoom meeting. Alright, but we are reiterating this. So to remind you that if you have any questions, please just direct them to the chat box and then I will be reading them during our Q&A portion. And if you want to ask your questions verbally, just please inform Ma'am Paula, again, through direct message, and then she will cue you, and please wait for the moderator to call on you. So just like in the previous panels, we will hold a Q&A session after all the presentations are played. Okay, so in this session, we have our three presenters in the, I hope, okay, nahahabol si Dr. Halili. Okay, and I'm sure they will be happy to entertain your questions afterwards. Okay, so let me introduce our first speaker. Right. So our first speaker is Dr. Servando D. Halili Jr. He has been doing qualitative research in history, folklore, culture, and public health for over 15 years. He has a doctorate in culture studies and fellowships from the Fulbright Commission and the Foundation for the Advancement, International Medical Education and Research. His work has been presented and published nationally and internationally. He led the assessment study of the skills of the CMNC-trained midwives from Basilan, Sulu, and Tawi-Tawi, with CMNC standing for Caring for Mothers and Newborn in the Community. This project was funded by SHIELD of the USAID. He is also senior researcher in the impact study on socially accountable health profession towards health equity, funded by the Training for Health Equity Network, New York. And he is also co-investigator of the Comprehensive Health Plan Philippines, sponsored by the International Development Center, IDRC, Canada. He currently heads the Instructional Materials Development Office of the Zamboanga State College of Marine Sciences and Technology and is part-time faculty of the School of Medicine, Ateneo de Zamboanga University in Zamboanga City. This paper, which he will be presenting, was co-authored with Dr. Ebony D. Lagare Mahinay, MPH, Medical Officer in Aurora, Zamboanga del Sur. All right, so let's listen to Dr. Halili's talk.
Pleasant day, everybody. I'm here to present to you traditional beliefs and healing practices on common diseases by folk healers in Mitsalib, Zamboanga del Sur. I am Dr. Servando D. Halili Jr. of the Zamboanga State College of Marine Sciences and Technology in Zamboanga City. And this work would have not been possible without the major contribution of Ebony D. Mahinay Arquisa, MO3, Marcos at Tubig Regional Hospital, Marcos at Tubig, Zamboanga del Sur. The study was set in Itzalip, a municipality in the heart of the Zamboanga Peninsula. It's a landlocked municipality and is only accessible by land. Its nearest, the city nearest to it is Pagadian, as Tangub, Osamis, Oroqueta, Dipolog, Tapitan are also nearby. Zamboanga City is a far distance. The objective of the study is to describe the traditional beliefs and healing practices on common diseases by folk healers in Mitsalip, Zamboanga del Sur. Documents the traditional beliefs on common diseases by the folk healers in Mitsalip, Zamboanga del Sur, and it describes the healing practices on common diseases by folk healers in Mitsalip, Zamboanga del Sur. The study is deemed significant because it's studying their traditional knowledge, beliefs, and healing practices on common diseases will enable the appreciation of some important health issues and may contribute to the preservation of acceptable practices and may serve as an input for consideration in the formulation of health policies in the municipality. The following methods were used. Research design was qualitative research design employing ethnography, especially participant observation. The respondents of this study were folk healers. They were studied and observed through field works. A total of 7 respondents were included in this study, of which 5 were females and 2 were males. To be included in the study, one has to be a folk healer who is a resident of Mitsalip, Zamboanga del Sur, practicing traditional healing for 5 years, willing to participate in the study, and the sampling method was for pulsive sampling. Before we move on to some results of this study, it would be first ideal to put into context health access in Mitsalip. One is unavailability of doctors and scarcity of medicine. Out of the 33 barangays, only 7 had barangay health stations or health centers which are manned by a midwife. With the Minsalip Infirmary Hospital is a 10-bed capacity facility and a medical doctor is available on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. The nearest medical facilities are available in the municipality of Molave, which is about 1.5 hours to 3 hours away. Most of the residents will still seek traditional folk medicine which are readily available in the community. Some findings. The traditional healers of Italy. Before that, let's look into their health belief. People in Italy believe that supernatural beings or incanto called diliingunato can cause illnesses. There are 2 types of incanto, the incantong itum or black supernatural being and the incantong puti, white supernatural being. And diseases, illnesses, maladies can be caused by what is known as gihangkop or gikalag, meaning you had a visitation from a dead relative, and these visits would normally come in the form of a dream or insects like butterflies entering into your house. Buyag or usog or cursing brought by words is also a cause of illness. Words could cause certain disease like too much appreciation. For example, if one says, "Tambo ka sa bata, oy," or the baby is too healthy, a counter utterance would be pura buyag, pwe pwe, pura buyag, or to ward off the evil eye. Or if somebody says something bad or to utter a curse, like basin mo disgrasya mo, you might get an accident, you also say puwera buyag or just tap on a flat surface many times to invalidate the curse. There are places in Mitsalip which are called supernatural dwellings. One area, for instance, in Barangay Bulanay is referred to as the city of supernatural beings. Uh, Locally, it's called Tauhan, and during the night, it is claimed that people will hear disco music coming from the area. Others would live in rivers, trees, forests, anthills, rocks, fields, and other inanimate areas. If you go through these areas, you must say tabi-tabi po or just making the sign of the cross when passing by. Ang encanto can cause illnesses when disturbed. So when one is disturbed, there are people who can help you out. They are called collectively as the mananambal or the manambalay, and they are classified into several. First is the herbulario or arbulario, the manghihilot, the mature or the bone setter, the mananabang or the midwife, the mananawal Okay, the one who heals by oil, saliva, and prayer, and the mambabarang, or the sorcerer. What are some of the healing practices? You have manubay, or tigi, taihop, tutho, or tawal, orasyon, himulso, haplas oblana, and hilot. Some will also perform tuob or steaming, panagkot, pamisa, and it is important to note that the mananambals can practice all this. What are some practices? First is the mananabang doing a prenatal checkup, and then the mananambal performing what is known as the tutho. Tutho is a spittle where you apply it, you spit on your hands and you apply it to your patient's head. Then you have hilot, okay, the setting of veins and ligaments and even bones. Then you have tigi, where raw egg is used to identify where the illness is in the body. They also practice what is known as tuob. Tuob is something that has been resurrected recently because of the COVID pandemic, but tuob is essentially a steam bath, and it is supposed to be effective in relieving you of of cold in the body. To ward off the evil spirit or illnesses, one can also use amulets or anting-anting. It can be worn in the stomach, especially for pregnant women. Shells and other objects can function as amulets. Brace, uh, Bracelets can also function as amulets. Take note that one of the bracelets there is actually available in the store. It is believed that bracelets protect children from the evil eye. And these are examples of assorted lanas or oils used by the folk healers. Notice the different containers with different oils inside. They normally do this on their own. These are their own concoction, and it is believed that they are potent in relieving you of illnesses. What are some causes of diseases and some remedies? Okay, for abdominal pain, for instance, sakit sa tiyan, it can be caused by lisa or napiang, a sprain in the chest, coccyx, or hip. Abdominal pain can also be caused by what is known as panuhot or the sudden exposure to wind, butod, okay, gas in the abdomen, nabuyagan or naabaybayan, caused by a supernatural being, nahiluan, napikpikan, nalatayan, poison, impatient, indigestion, ulcer, and eating forbidden fruit. The treatments will be herbal medication, including bilabila, escobang matawis, luya, musikan. Other remedies will include the use of itlog na bisaya. For headache or sakit sa ulo, the cause can either be pasar o gutom or gikabuhi. So if you have headache, you have to relax or you take herbal medication like sinaw-sinaw or lagnot. Or you can subject yourself to pahilot or massage. Diarrhea can be caused by teething, nabuyagan again, nahiluan, lisa and piyang. Okay, you can take a glass of water with a pinch of salt. You can also take lagnud leaves, kulitis, kaimito, bayabas, or you can use the different oils and apply it to your stomach. Cough can be caused again by lisa and piang, okay, and can be caused by dust, or smoke or change of weather. The herbal medication will include decoction or poultice of gabon and calabo leaves, hampol or haklop, and you can also subject yourself to hilot. Body weakness, kakapoy sa lawas or bughat, okay, is caused by nabughat or too much work. And the sinaw-sinaw root, panyawan, and elepante leaves may help you relieving your pain. You can also relax and you can take Planax or Alaxan. Measles are believed to be caused by virus. Indeed, measles are viral. Dala sa hugaw sa hangin. So if you have measles, you can take amoxicillin, 1 tablet per day, and say some prayers. If you have chickenpox, again, it's something viewed as dala sa hugaw sa hangin. Haplas or inong uglana, applying or drink of folkloric oil. Then you have panubay, hilot, tutho, orasyon, and some special prayers for it. Tetanus is also believed, they also believe that they can cure tetanus, and the cause of the disease is natunok og taya nga lansang punctured by rusty nails or any metal. The treatment is cockroach, uk or tai sa uk. Okay, cockroach feces or its feces, boil the cockroach or feces and set aside until it becomes a bit warm and drink. Then you also take antibiotic like an amoxicillin. Diabetes, sigig kaon og hinamis, eating of too much sweets and even pork, and decoction of tuba-tuba or corn hair is believed to be effective in treating diabetes. The herbalists themselves grow their own, the mananambals grow their own herbal garden, plantita din sila. And here in this blurred picture, they are actually the healers, and they grow their own gardens, and from their gardens, they they draw their materials or medicines for healing. Example is tuba-tuba for diabetes, wound and diabetes, elepante for body malaise, sinaw-sinaw for headache, UTI or arthritis, espada or tigre-tigre, wound and body malaise, lagnot, that is, wound or headache, diarrhea, and cough, and sabana or guyabano abdominal cramps. So what are some concluding statements? Folk healers are essential for the community in terms of providing an alternative healthcare, especially to the far-flung areas where modern healthcare is not available. Yet their practices have been frowned upon by modern medicine, leading to their marginalization. Nevertheless, it is in these very margins they continue to operate. Their continued existence warrants serious academic considerations. Traditional healing practices may be viewed as a double-edged sword. It can cure and destroy. But isn't that true with modern medicine too? Muchas gracias.
Okay, so we ended with a very thought-provoking question. Let's move on to our next presentation. Let me just introduce our second speaker. So our second speaker is Mr. Larry Boy B. Sabangan. He lives in Calibo, Aklan, and is currently teaching at the senior high school, specifically the Regional Science High School for Region 6. He graduated with a Master of Arts in Filipino Education from West Visayas State University, Iloilo City. He also finished courses on language, culture, and society from the University of the Philippines Open University. He is a member of Sangfil or the Sanggunian sa Filipino and other literary organizations in his province. All right, so let's listen to Mr. Sabangan's presentation.
Madalas natin silang dinadaanan, hindi pinapansin at minsan pa nga'y nilalayuan. Karaniwan lang sila'y maging tampulan ng tukso, lalo na sa mga bata, dahil sa kanilang may itim na balat, kulot na buhok, at sa kakaibang punto at paraan ng pananalita. Sila ang mga ati, isa sa mga etnikong pangkat sa ating bansa. Malayo-layo na rin ang binihis na kasaysayan upang matuntun pa ang kanilang pinagmulan at kung paano sila kumalat sa buong sulok ng Pilipinas. Dito sa lalawigan ng Aklan, lalo na sa kabisera nitong Kalibo at sa tanyag nitong paraisong isla ng Boracay, matatagpuan ang ilan sa kanila. Naging bahagi na ng pang-araw-araw na mukha at galaw ng lansangan. Naging karaniwan na ang kanilang presensya at maluwag na ang pagtanggap sa kanilang tribo. Ngunit sa kapila ng kanilang natural na agtang kulay at kingking mga buhok, ay kapansin-pansin ang kanilang wika at higit na ang paraan ng kanilang pamumuhay at ang produkto ng kanilang ikinabubuhay. Oo, ang kanilang tinatawag na pamuwong o mas alam natin sa tawag na panggagamot. Karaniwan na sa tao ang tumungo sa ospital at magpakonsulta sa doktor. Ngunit ang iilan sa ating mga kababayan ay sumasangguni at tinatangkilik ang kanilang mga medisina. Ang iba pa nga'y mas higit na pinahahalagahan ang mga langis, kahoy at bato-bato ng mga ati. Ngunit ano nga kaya ang kaugnayan ng kanilang tradisyonal na medisina sa kontemporaryong panggagamot? May kinalaman kaya ang kanilang sinamak, karmen at panaming sa ikinagagaling ng iilan? O baka naman nasa kanilang wika at panitikan ang pinagbuhugutan ng kanilang pamumuo? Ano pa man ang maging kalutasan, ito'y higit na nakaaapekto sa ating kultura at higit sa lahat ang impluwensya nito sa atin bilang isang Filipino.
Naimbag nga aldaw, madayad nga adlaw, magandang araw. Pamugong, wika at panitikan sa medisina ng mga ate sa probinsya ng Aklan. Ayon sa kasaysayan, ang mga katutubo ay napabibilang sa tinatawag na negrito. Ang negrito ay galing sa salitang Kastila na ang ibig sabihin ay maitim na tao. Maaari rin namang tawaging maliit na negro. Ang mga negrito ay matatagpuan sa iba't ibang panig ng kapuluan, mula sa hilagang silangan ng Luzon hanggang sa silangang Mindanao. Sa Kabisayaan naman sila ay kilala sa tawag na ati. Dito sa probinsya na Aklan kumalat ang mga tribong ito upang mamuhay. Mula sila sa mga karatigding probinsya ng Negros, Iloilo, Guimaras at Antique. Kumalat ang kanilang mga grupo upang mangalakal at mamuhay na gaya ng mga karaniwang grupo ng tao at unti-unti na ring naging sibilisado. Ngunit naroon pa rin ang kakaibang uri ng pamumuhay, kaugalian, pananamit, tirahan at pagpapahalaga sa buhay. At dito sa Aklan, na hindi lamang kilala sa paraisong isla ng Boracay, ito rin ay tinuturing na pinakamatandang probinsya sa bansa. Ito ay isa sa 4 na sakop na bumubuo sa isla ng Panay. Bukod sa pangunahing hanap buhay na paghahabi ng pinya, pagsasaka at pangingisda ay mas lalong pinatitingkad ang lalawigan dahil sa angkin nitong pagpapahalagang kultural. Kaya naman ito ang binansagang Mother of all Festivals, ang Santo Niño Ati-Atihan. Sa kasalukuyan ay mayroon ng 4 na ati community sa buong probinsya, sa Ibahay, Malay, Altavas at sa Bulwang, Kalibo. Mayroon namang 27 sambahayan ang mga ati sa Kalibo na siyang kabisera ng probinsya na may paunahing pinagkakakitaan ng paggawa ng silhig o walis, paggawa ng mga produktong nito, pagtatanim ng pakwan, at ang pagbebenta ng mga bugong o gamot. at nasa mga 70 taon na naninirahan ng mga ate sa probinsya. Isa sa pangunahing kinabubuhay ng mga ate ay ang panggagamot o mas kilala sa tawag na pamugong, bilang alternatibong lunas sa mga karamdaman sa katawan, pangontra sa masasamang elemento at iba pang uri nito, at nasa iba't ibang anyo at uri gaya ng karmen, sinamak at panaming. Ang mga ito ay maaaring isabit sa kasuotan at ipahid sa mga masasakit na bahagi ng katawan. Dumadaan sa kakaibang proseso ang paglikha nila ng bugong na nagmula pa ang mga sangkap sa masusukal na kagubatan sa itaas ng kabundukan. Ayon kay Cantillo sa kanya aklat na Komunikasyon at Pananaliksik sa Wika at Kulturang Filipino, nagkakaroon ng varyasyon ng wika dahil sa lokasyong kinalalagyan ng mga taong gumagamit nito. Marahil dahil sa paglilipat-lipat din ginagawa ng mga ate dahil sa pamumuhay, ay mas nahahasa pa ang uri at antas ng gawin nila. Kaya naman ang ilan sa mga halimbawa ng impluwensyang nagaganap ay ang salitang pamugong na nasa anyong wikang Akyanon at ang salitang pamulong sa Hiligaynon na maaaring maiugnay, at ang paggagamot naman ang kahulugan sa Filipino. Ang tawag sa wika ng mga ati ay inati, ngunit naimpluwensyahan nila ito ng mga wika sa lugar na kanilang pinagmulan o pinagpalagian, kaya ng Hiligaynon, Kinaraya at Akyanon. Narito ang ilan sa mga salitang ginagamit ng mga ate sa kanilang pamugong: haplas, banyos, bughat, binat, bugong, gamot, pamugong, panggagamot, surwano, manggagamot, hilamon, damo, ginakalokalo, pagsanlag, nahamkol o tampo, tapal, puslo, nakausli, dalisunson, kapanganganak, buyag, usog, panaming, panagang, pangontra at proteksyon, pasingit, masasa, aligagang sanggol, amulet o kilkig, paglason sa tao, bagagon, baging, halit, pagkulam sa tao, batyag, pakiramdam, taglugar, masamang elemento. Malaki ang kinalaman ng pag-aaral na ito sa medisina o panggagamot na ginagawa, lalo na sa tradisyonal na pamamaraan. Ang buong konsepto ng pag-aaral ay tinatalakay upang mabigyang tingkad ang pamumugong o panggagamot ng mga ate. Ang ilan sa mga bugong nila ay binubuo ng mga bato-bato, mga sanga-sanga ng kahoy, mga langis, buto ng prutas, at ang iba pang may kakaibang anyo at hugis gaya ng kabayong dagat, bala ng baril, at metal na matatagpuan daw sa kabundukan. Ang mga gamot nila ay nagkakahalaga mula 50 pesos hanggang 500 piso, depende sa laki at dami. Narito ang ilan sa mga bugong na binebenta ng mga ate. Bilibutoon, gamot para sa goiter. Milagrosa, para sa pagtunaw ng mga sakit sa kidney. Makabuhay, para sa pagtunaw din ng mga sakit sa kidney. Dawa, sa bughat o binat. Salimuno, para sa high blood at pagpuslo o pagbuslo ng pusod ng sanggol. Sibukaw, gamot para naman sa hapo o balda sa katawan. Albutra, isang uri ng baging na para sa katarata o sa bagong panganak. Kahoy kamiyas, gamot para naman sa nerbiyos. Panubol, nakukuha sa gilid ng dagat ng mga damo at para sa mga sanggol na hindi matahan sa pag-iyak. Kulantro, anis at romero. Ito na may mga gamot para sa tigdas. Santuara, sa mga kilkig o amulet. Tableya, sa mga pangangati ng balat. Kabayo de la mar, panghihilo at hapo. Banawog nga bugtong, isinusuot naman na may nag-iisang sanga na ginagamit bilang panagang, panaming, o pangontra o proteksyon. Carmen, proteksyon para sa mga sanggol. at ang sinamak na ipinapahid sa mga usog o sakit ng tiyan. Ang ilan sa proseso ng kanilang pagbuo ng mungong ay ginugunting-gunting, sinisipat-sipat at inihahalo-halo. Mapapansing hindi ito dumadaan sa anumang pagluluto o paghahalo ng mga kimikal, maliban na lang sa iba nilang gamot na may halong langis. Ang paraan naman ng paghahanda upang maging epektibo ang mga bugong ay maaaring itapal, inumin, ihalo sa tubig, ibanyos, isabit, isukbit, pakuluan, lagain, isanlag, o di kaya ay ilagay sa tuob. Sa ilang mga pag-aaral ay naipapaliwanag ang pagkakaroon ng kaugnayan ng mga halagang gamot at ng karaniwang gamot na nakasanayan ng mga tao. Ang pagtangkilik sa mga tradisyonal at ang kontemporanyong panggagamot. Sinabi ng isang artikulo sa The Journal of the American Medical Association ang tungkol sa sabay-sabay na pag-inom ng mga inireresetang gamot kasama ang mga halamang gamot. Sinabi nito, mula sa 44% ng mga nasa hustong gulang na nagsasabing sila ay regular na umiinom ng inireresetang mga gamot, halos isa o 18.4% sa 5 ang inuulat na sabay na umiinom ng kahit isang produktong halamang gamot at isang bitamina na mataas ang doses o pareho nito. Ngunit hindi pa rin maikakaila sa mga tumatangkilik na paniwala ng ilan sa mga kwento-kwento o sugilanon ukol sa panggagamot, maging ang mga ati ay pinagbabatayan din ang mga ito. Pinaniniwalaan ng mga ati ang tungkol sa taglugar o ang mga masasamang elemento bilang siyang dahilan kaya nagkakasakit ang mga tao. Karaniwang nakikita sila sa mga liblib na gubat, mga kabundukan, at maging sa mga masusukal na puno. Sa mga oras na magambala mo raw ang isa sa kanila, ay tiyak ang iyong kaparusahan. Gaganti at gaganti ang mga taglugar sa sino mang nagawi sa kanilang teritoryo at hindi man lamang lumisensya. Maaaring magkaroon ng pangangati sa balat, dadapuan ng sakit, o di kaya ay mamalasin. Ang usog ang isa sa pangontra ng mga ati. Pinaniniwalaang kapag ang isang tao na gutom at kinausap o tinitigan ng ati ay maaaring mausog, hihilab ang tiyan, at magdamag itong mararamdaman. Makakaramdam din ng kakaibang sakit at ang tanging lunas lamang ay ang lawayan ito ng ati o di kaya ay ang mga buwong na binibenta nila. Maging sa usapin ukol sa pananampalataya ng panggagamot ay pinaniniwalaang ang sinaunang mga ati ay likas ng manggagamot o manugbugong. Kung paano ang mga tao ay malayang naninirahan ay gayon din daw ang mga elementong hindi nakikita ng sino man. At ang hasik nila ang ginagamot ng mga sinaunang mga ati. Tinatawag nila ang mga nilalang na ito na kalag at ang mga manggagamot ay tinatawag din nilang surwano o babaylan na sa panahong ito ay hindi na raw nakikita, lalo na at ano noong manugbulong ay namatay na o matandang manggagamot. Ngunit hindi din nila ikinakaila na kung sa unang panahon ng kanilang pamumuhay ay umaabot ng higit sa 150 ang kanilang tribo bago bawian ang buhay. Ngayon ay halos naglalaro sa 60 hanggang 70 na lamang. Dahil sa mga pamumuong na ginagawa ng mga ati ay pinaninindiganan nilang mabisa ang mga binibenta nila sapagkat maging sa kanilang sariling pamilya ay ito ang kanilang ginagamit. At sa tanang buhay nila ay hindi pa sila nakapasok sa tinatawag na ospital. Aniya, hanggang may mga bato-bato at sanga-sanga sa bukid, may mga hilamon sa dalampasigan, mananatili ang kanilang pamumugong. Agmayanak unay, sayamat nga abo, maraming salamat. Pamugong, wika at panitikan sa medisina ng mga ate sa probinsya ng Aklan.
Right, so that was the pronunciation pala, pamuong. Okay, so we really see the connection between the two presentations, but the way that they have organized the information about the various healing practices of the groups are distinctly different. So while we have already seen the abstracts of these presentations, this still makes me excited for the next presentation. Okay, so our last presenter, let me introduce to you Germelina Cynthia Dacanay Jaramillo. She finished BS Psychology at the University of the Philippines, Baguio in 1986. She is presently the Executive Director of the Cordillera Women's Education Action Research Center, or CWORK, a grassroots-based non-government organization which she helped found in 1987. CWORK particularly works on empowering Indigenous women in the region through organizing, capacity building, evidence-based research, advocacy, networking, and direct economic and social support for the sector. She is also a mental health practitioner trained and uh, with wide experience in processing victims and survivors of violence against women and the psychosocial processing of disaster-stricken communities. So let's listen to Director Dacanay Jaramillo.
Warm greetings to everyone. I will be sharing a case study about the indigenous psychosocial support mechanisms in dealing with critical events among the people of Tanglag in Lubuagan, Kalinga. Psychological intervention in mitigating the mental health impacts on the populace in disaster-stricken communities is a relatively recent development in psychological practice in the Philippines. Two of the current commonly utilized mechanisms in addressing the psychosocial impacts of calamities or critical events are psychological first aid and psychological debriefing. There are, however, debates and issues being raised about the efficacy of such methods of intervention in building community resilience. Moreover, these approaches often requires external responders to facilitate the process. The poignant reality is the nominal awareness of mental health practitioners or first responders on local processes employed by communities, particularly indigenous knowledge systems and practices, serving as psychosocial support mechanisms in dealing with critical events. The dearth of studies, specifically the documentation of the local practices, which are now fast disappearing, also reflects this sad truth. My presentation today focuses on a case study that was conducted in 2011 on a tradition still alive and utilized by the indigenous people of Tanglag in Kalinga, Philippines, in responding to critical events. Kalinga, like the other provinces of the Cordillera, has a population which are still predominantly indigenous peoples. Traditional life risks of the Tanglag people have a level of persistence up to the present where the community still carries a strong sense of collectivism, promoting values for the common good, such as mutual help, compassion, caring and sharing, and combating individualist ways or outlooks. Nurturing the land and environment is a norm endeavored at benefiting present and future generations. These values and practices are linked in their fundamental concept about land as being sacred and the vital source of life. Thus, for the indigenous peoples of Kalinga, protection and defense of their ancestral land, including its resources and people, are essential and paramount. It then follows that whenever life-threatening events occur in their villages, the people's automatic response is to safeguard its people, land, and territory, illustrating strong community cohesion and demonstrating collective strength in addressing the debacles they confront. These indigenous knowledge systems have allowed them to cope, rendering the impacts of calamities more manageable and less traumatic on those affected. In this particular research, utilizing the theoretical foundation, concepts, and methodology of Psikolohiyang Pilipino, indigenous knowledge systems and practices which act as psychosocial processes that are uniquely based on the experience of the Tanglad people have undoubtedly been established. Specifically, the study was able to determine local approaches and mechanisms, including the various stages of the spontaneous process performed by the community, resulting to the mitigation of mental health impacts of disasters and other adversities on the affected populace. It was also able to ascertain local concepts and terms referring to a range of psychological conditions or reactions exhibited by affected individuals. When the study was conducted, the community has just experienced one of the most devastating tropical cyclones, Typhoon Pepeng. A community folk narrated the precarious situation the villagers faced as an oversized boulder rolled down from the upstream of Chico River, blocking the water course. A villager who witnessed this saw the danger this may bring, so he started to call the attention of the entire village. The respondents narrated how the process goes, starting with mga Joe, initiated through a bugang or pakoy by someone who calls the attention of everyone in the village through a long howling sound. This serves as a warning about an impending emergency, prompting each one to stay alert to respond to a potentially life-threatening situation. Then, the next stage is agpakni, where the adult members ensure everyone's safety, especially the most vulnerable segments of the community, the children and the elderly. Then, the community folks or the omili gather into a designated place for a community meeting called panag-uumong. The native leader of the village or the pangat leads the assessment of the situation and plan out steps to be taken, they term as mang-uukutchen or mang-tutuyig. Each one is assigned a task, mabenbentu or mafinfintu, such as food production or preparation, search, rescue or retrieval, and taking care of the children. Throughout the incident, elders monitor the situation until the critical incident ends. The process continues, however, even after the catastrophe is over. In cases where families are affected, for instance, their homes or fields damaged, village mates extend assistance and support, they term as mang tuyungen. Changas is collective work in a day involving the whole community to assist the villager in need, such as hauling construction materials and rebuilding damaged structures or do other incidental tasks, such as food preparation for those lending support. Under Changas, no payment is required for those who work, but they are provided with meals. Then comes the practice of pangu, done after Changas to continue helping villagers requiring further assistance. Compensation is already expected, though not monetary, but in kind or through labor exchange. The community was able to share local indigenous terms referring to a range of psychological reactions or conditions that individuals may undergo. These include emotional states such as langchu, sadness or sorrow, ogjat, phobia or anxiety, manjebjeb, grief, nakushjaben, shock or trauma, manchochoy, someone manifesting symptoms of depression, kuchkuchabong, losing one's mind, matingang, someone demented or exhibiting odd or bizarre behavior. For those exhibiting these states, local customs and rituals are performed to ease essentially the psychological burden of the one suffering from such. Lumang Pao is a ritual performed at dawn by a dawak to aid in the healing process and restore the shattered spirit of the afflicted person. Then we have Mancheku, where people show their sympathy and empathy to those affected. They also have forms of stress release or management. Mang Uug is storytelling for children, but during disasters, this is a form of letting them calm down and distract them from the distressing incident. Then we have Iyaveg, is when villagers collectively curse a subject who has done them wrong to show outrage, yet it is done in a joyful manner with their hands raised. Some of the psychological effects of the process, customs, and rituals shared were the collective feeling of respite, magsisinagkat, sense of relief from a distressing experience, makaangos or tumiyok, or unburdening, rising above a depressive state, lomegpot. Let me now share the conclusions and recommendations from the study. Indigenous knowledge and practices are not yet considered as formal psychosocial processes by mainstream mental health practitioners as other developed and structured psychosocial processing techniques, such as stress debriefing and psychological first aid. But the process has practically the same goal, though unstated or unrecorded, and has been spontaneously performed by members of indigenous communities through generations already. The traditional practice has been articulated to ease the psychological burden on those affected and operates as a form of survival or coping mechanism by the community, making this appropriate and relevant for them. A number of the noted differences between mainstream methods and the indigenous methods are: in the mainstream method, it is reactive. It is initiated after the event, while in the indigenous method, it is proactive, done during the event or even after. For the responders in the mainstream method, it usually comes from external of the community, while in the indigenous method, it comes from someone internal and involves the entire community. For the mainstream method, it tries to deal with the individual's experiences, while in the indigenous method, it deals not only with individual experiences, but collective experiences as well. For the mainstream method, once one needs to familiarize on the culture of the affected community, while in the indigenous method, it is integral to the culture of the affected people or the community. For the mainstream method, process is usually unfamiliar and needs to be introduced in the community, while in the indigenous method, process is spontaneous and is part of the community's life race. For the mainstream method, process usually ends when the program is terminated, while in the indigenous method, it is a continuing process, a regular practice by the community. As recommendations, it is with the hope that this case study can initiate the documentation of others similar community processes, especially that these customary practices are fast disintegrating because of the integration of indigenous communities in mainstream society. These traditions can either be reintroduced in the community or can be incorporated into established methods with the aim of making psychosocial interventions in such settings more relevant and appropriate on people affected. Innovations in the approaches can also be introduced to enhance the process and adapt to the community where these interventions are to be conducted. SeaWork, the organization that I belong to, has actually started the documentation of other processes among the Kankanaais in Mountain Province and in Northern Benguet, and among the Ibaloys of Ukab in Itogon. It is intended that this be brought back to the communities to consider integrating in their disaster risk reduction response and mitigation programs and measures. Thank you.
Ayan, okay. So actually, the last presentation reminded me of the definition of health from the World Health Organization. So sinearch ko talaga siya. So sabi ng WHO, health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Okay, so in this panel, we have looked at health holistically, and the speakers are, of course, I think, ready to receive your questions. Meron na po akong natatanggap dito from our chat box, pero of course, you can still send in your questions sa ating chat box, whether anonymous or not. Okay, so yung mga speakers po natin, if you wish to turn on your cameras para makita kayo ng mga participants natin, you may do so. Andito na po ba si Dr. Halili? Is he here? So mukhang hindi na siya nakahabol, ano? Okay, so I think we can direct our questions to Director Jaramillo and kay Mr. Sabangan. All right, so let me first start with the questions in the chat box. Tapos yung mga gustong magbigay ng kanilang questions will come later on. So the first question goes to Ma'am Germelina. Very interesting study po and very relevant at this time. Did you have some efforts to present the results of your study for use or guidance of agencies in charge of crisis management, for instance, in the LGUs of Kalinga or DSWD?
Yeah. Okay. We were able to present this in various fora, but not yet among LGUs and with line agencies. Although in the fora that we were able to present this, there were some government representatives of government agencies that were present. But that would be a good idea to share this with local government units to consider integrating in their disaster response mitigation measures.
Thank you po. So first come first serve na lang po tayo, no, yung nag-raise ng kamay. So mauuna po si Jersky, tapos si Ma'am Annalyn po. So si Jersky muna.
Hello po. Ay, naka-mute po pala. Sorry. Hello po. Good afternoon. Okay, naririnig na po?
Yes. Naririnig ka namin.
Yes. Thank you po for the presentation. Thank you din po for giving us the insights and inputs regarding your research. I am just curious lang po regarding dun sa mga nakuha po nating details, nakuha po nating mga pictures, di po ba meron po tayo dun sa IPRA, Indigenous People Rights Act, and yun dun po sa mga law natin na dapat po meron po itong proper documentation and proper na dumadaan po sa NCIP bago po nating ma-present. Tanong ko lang po kung dumaan po ito sa tamang proseso. And next thing, kasi po nakita naman natin na ang ganda po ng binigay ninyo po for the knowledge conservation, for knowledge documentation. Kaso babalik din po ulit tayo sa tanong na the openness of IK. Kasi kaya natanong ko na din po ito kanina, pero yun po nagiging problema kasi nagkaroon tayo ng openness ng indigenous knowledge para bigyan ng boses ang ating mga IPs, ang ating mga indigenous people. Subalit, ang nagiging problema po dahil sa boses na nabigay natin, ito'y naaabuso ng ilan, maging ng mga academician po. Gaya nga po ng sabi ni Posey, 1996, yung mga academician and scientists ay ginagamit ang IK at ang indigenous knowledge para sa kanilang pansariling interes at nakakalimutan ng mga indigenous people sa pangkalahatan. Yun naman po ang aking tanong. Yung una, kung ito po ay dumaan sa tamang proseso ng NCIP, at yun po, yung kung paano, ano po yung pagtingin natin sa openness ng IK. Na alam naman natin sa globalized na mundo, madami po tayong nagiging problema sa pag-document, pag-conserve, at pag-alaga sa ating kultura. Maraming salamat po.
Okay, thank you for your questions, Jersky. Sorry, tinawag na kita sa pangalan mo. I remember you were my student before. Na-reflex lang ako. May I know kung kanino directed yung questions mo?
For both presenter po, ma'am. Hi, ma'am. Miss you.
Hello. Okay, so for both presenters daw, sinong gustong mauna?
Ako na lang. Sige. Yung sa first question, yung tungkol kung dumaan sa process nung kasi meron ngang FPIC dapat nadadaanan ito, di ba? Through NCIP. Ito actually yung isang nagiging problema namin kasi medyo rigid yung process at difficult nga talaga yung process ng application with them kasi kailangan kumuha ng consent sa community, tapos may babayaran kang process, etc. Anyway, ang mas dumaan, yung ginawa ko kasi ito, it's an academic requirement of my masteral, yung thesis nung nagma-masters pa ako. Kaya 2011 ito, kaya hindi talaga siya dumaan pa sa process nung based doon sa IPRA. Pero still, even yung mga recent researches na ginagawa namin, nahihirapan kami doon. Mas ang na-accomplish namin ay yung consent ng mga communities at respondents, pero not necessarily yung process ng NCIP. Yun. So, to answer question number 1. Tapos yung second question about yung tungkol doon sa paggamit doon sa ICCS ng mga individual at iilan, totoo rin yun. Pero on our case, doon sa pag-document, hindi siya for academic purposes. It's really to bring back to the community yung what is really theirs. No? Kasi naman nila to practice nila to, pero mabilis na nawawala, nagdi-disintegrate na to dahil nga doon sa integration ng maraming communities into the mainstream. So talagang dapat ma-document. Pero dapat ding bumalik ito sa community at sila mismo ang dapat gumamit. It's not supposed to be just for the classroom setting or just be put in the library. And para makapag-gain lang ng recognition, no? So, 'yon, ang mahalaga siguro sa mga researches, it has to go back to the community para magamit din nila ito. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Cynthia.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes, good afternoon. So, okay lang po kung audio kasi sa video medyo na po kasi internet, may interrupt. So anyway po, bali sa first question regarding dun sa permit at dun sa National Commission for or sa NCIP, Bali, same with ma'am. Bali, hindi ito nakadaan doon sa tama dapat na proseso. Bagaman, bumalik ako sa local hanggang sa sa province na proseso. Bali, ang nangyari po ay mula po muna dun sa group, inalam muna kung sino yung namumuno o yung leader. Kasi meron po kasi silang like tribe leader na yun yung nag-aalaw na kung sakaling pwede ba silang ma-interview or anything about them. So mula doon, i-address ka nila sa munisipyo, papunta sa munisipyo, yung mga minimum is yung mga IP coordinator ba sa mga community na ito. Kasi we have for ate community lang dito sa provinces. So nag-focus ako dito sa pinaka-kabise, sa capital, sa Kalibo. Then mula dun sa munisipyo ay pumunta ako doon sa province kasi doon yung pinaka-head talaga ng buong the province-wide na IP coordinator. Then di naman nabanggit yung about doon sa NCIP, which is nagkaroon din naman kasi ng black and white na papers na like yung agreement ba, parang sort of contract ba yun na like ito yung mangyayari, ito lang yung limit, ito lang yung pwede. Parang ganun. So with that, I think ay parang hindi naman ako masyadong nag-go beyond sa kailangan kong kunin sa kanila at with all the respect naman at saka restrictions ba na kailangan para ma-protect din sila. Kasi I know na kailangan talaga yun eh. Pero I'm thankful din kasi nalaman ko mula kay Sir kanina na yun nga na kailangan talaga ay mas dumaan para mas maging legal. Then, so I guess nasagot ko rin siguro yung number 1, no? So, through IP coordinators. Then, sa pangalawa, sa usapin naman ng Indigenous Knowledge System, yes, medyo ako dun eh. Nakakalungkot lang sapagkat medyo agree ako dun sa sinabi na nagagamit yung IKS ng ibang mga researchers siguro or ibang individual or group na minsan actually may mga naanood ako, I don't know kung mga na-publish na to, pero may mga narinig ako like parang ginagawa na rin tong business, like na nagiging bentahan na rin ng at yung pangalawa pa is naro-romanticize yung yung idea na dapat ay hindi. So siguro yung magiging ko dito is yung purpose ng researcher. Kailangan ang purpose ay mag-stick lang doon. At ang purpose ay kailangan bumalik sa kung ano yung kailangan ding makuha nung mga respondents or itong mga group na to, itong mga kapatid nating mga ati. Sapagkat after all, itong mga researchers na to is para din naman talaga sa kanila. So hindi dapat natin angkinin, hindi ito kwento natin, kundi ito ay kwento nila. Tayo ay mga kumbaga instrument. So, yun lang po. Thank you.
Dagdag lang, Ma'am Rachel.
Go ahead po, ma'am.
Oo, I think yung process ng FPIC, malaga yun sa community level. Kailangan mo naman talaga ng consent ng community, pero doon kasi napaka-difficult kung titignan nyo yung process ng NCIP. Baka mas ito ay applicable doon sa mga, yun nga, yung ginagamit ito for business purposes, yung IKS, yung ganyan. Pero if you bring it back to the community, I think, mas ang consent sana ay mas manggagaling mismo sa mga tao doon sa lokalidad.
Okay, maraming salamat po. Next na magtatanong si Ma'am Annalyn Munoz. Go ahead po, ma'am.
Thank you, Ma'am Rachel. Salamat po sa mga presentation. Pero ang tanong ko po ay para kay Sir Sabangan. Kasi naalala ko yung research ko tungkol sa mga AITA sa Bamban Tarlac. Na-research ko na yung talagang indigenous knowledge nila tungkol sa medicine. Nakatulong siya sa mga American guerrilla noong World War II. At nabasa ko rin doon sa source na meron silang indigenous doctor na kinakailangan talaga para sa, kumbaga parang sa prescription, right dosage ng mga herbal medicines na tinitake nila. Nabanggit nyo sa inyong presentation na parang kahit sino sa mga ati ay gumagawa at nagbebenta ng gamot? Meron pa bang role yung kanilang traditional or indigenous doctor sa ganitong, ano ba? Hindi naman commodification, pero yun, hanap buhay na rin, no, yung pagtitinda ng mismong gamot. And then yung second question ko, sino-sino ba yung tumatangkilik dito sa gamot na to? At gaano kabisa yung gamot nila? Kasi yung na-share nyo ay parang internal perspective ng mga ati, di ba? So para sa kanila, mabisa yung gamot. Pero para sa mga non-ati people na gumagamit nitong gamot, ano yung tingin nila dito sa bisa ng gamot? Gaano ba talaga siya kabisa? Meron bang pag-aaral or komento ang mga professional medical practitioner natin tungkol sa mga gamot na ibinibenta at ginagawa ng mga ati? Ayun lang po, maraming salamat.
Salamat din po. Ma'am, hindi ko na po nakita yun. Sige po. Bali, salamat po sa tanong at doon din po sa inyong naging pag-aaral before na na-connect din po dito. Bali, sa pagkakaano ko po, no, meron po kayong dalawang tanong or kung may mamiss man po ako, mamaya pwede naman po. So sa una, yun nga, yung about sa prescription, no, or kung sila-sila or kahit sino na lang, no. So una doon ay yes, bali nabanggit doon sa naging FGD ay meron sila before na tinatawag na mga noong manugbulong. Ito yung mga matatanda na sila lang ang may karapatan na manggamot. Yun nga, yung magbigay ng mga kakailanganin o yun nga nabanggit din kanina. Subalit ngayon ay nagkaroon na ng modifikasyon o pagbabago sapagkat una dahil sa paglilipat-lipat din nila ng lokasyon at pangalawa ay dahil sa survival din, dahil kailangan nilang makahanap ng kanilang ikinabubuhay. So dahil doon ay lahat na ng may kakayahan na makapaggamot o makapagbenta ay inaalaw na halos nila lahat. Actually, meron nga akong nakita din na kahit mga anak nila ay nagiging kasama na rin nila doon sa market na nagbebenta. Kaya wala na yung mga traditional o yung mga tinitingnan nilang pinaka-leader na mga manggagamot. Then sa I don't know kung ito yung sunod, yung about sa visa. Ito po yata.
Opo. Ano po yung tingin ng mga tao o ng mga aklanon sa visa na ito? At meron bang komento or pagbabawal yung mga professional medical practitioners natin sa mga ganitong
Okay po. Doon pagdating sa usapin ng kanilang gamot, bali una ko kasi na tinignan, yes tama po yung internal o salik mula mismo sa kanila regarding sa visa nito. Siyempre, natural siya sabihin nila yun kasi una ay binibenta nila. At marketing strategy din is kailangan pag nagbebenta is ikaw din mismo yung una gagamit at kailangan mapatunayan na ito ay tawag dito, mabisa. Then mula naman doon sa mga una muna pala ay doon sa mga lokal na tumatangkilik na mga aklanon kasi naipag-usapan doon sa isa sa mga interview is yung dami ng mga bumibili. Kung iano natin ito, ilalatag natin to sa percentage ay mga out of 100 ay papalagay natin na nasa 30% mula doon sa buong komunidad na tumatangkilik o bumibili ng mga gamot o na kanilang mga buwong. Mula naman doon sa mga komento mula sa mga health practitioners, health professionals ay wala at sarado ang usapin o komento tungkol dito sapagkat nagkakaroon po ng conflict pagdating doon sa paniniwala. Kasi like sabihin na o magbaba ng or maglunsad, magbaba o magpakita ng pag-aaral o komento yung mga
nasa professional na hanay, maapektuhan ang itong mga grupo na ito. Kaya sa ngayon, sa akin po na mga nakalap ay wala pong tugma o direktang pagtingin doon sa pagitan ng mga professionals at ng mga tipong ito. Ma'am?
Okay. So maraming salamat sa tanong, Ma'am Ana. We have a question here dito sa ating chat box directed to Ma'am Cynthia. So sabi dito, given the general lack of knowledge of people towards mental health, is it a good idea to replicate the psychological rehabilitation process of the community, in other areas of the Philippines?
Yeah, if I got the question right, I think it would be good to document local practices that are still existing in the different parts of the country. Kaya lang kasi these practices um, uh, are more relevant kasi na ma-document doon sa mga indigenous communities pa, yung mga homogeneous pa yung communities. Kasi kung mixed groups na, mixed ethnic groups yung nasa isang community, mas mahirap kasi na itignan kung ano yung dominant practice doon. Pero doon sa mga areas kung saan these are still existing, it would be good to document these practices and reintroduce them back to the community, lalo na at nawawala na yung ganitong kultura.
Okay. So ito po yung tanong po niya ay nasagot niyo naman yung tungkol sa not only documentation but also bringing them back to the community for them to consider kung applicable pa siya or appropriate siya to apply. Kasi yung tanong po niya dito is, can it be replicated still at present?
It could be replicated kung yung practice ay fresh pa. Yung kumbaga disintegrating pa lang. Kaya lang kung disintegrated na kasi yung practice at mix na yung yung community. Siguro pwede kang kumuha lang ng ilang mga principles ng kanilang practice. Kasi sa totoo lang yung iba naman doon sa iba't ibang komunidad ay meron pa namang ganong practice, no? Halimbawa yung sympathy, yung empathy, yung halimbawa dito sa Itogon kahit na marami ng practices ang wala, pwede pa rin naman na yung tungkol dun sa storytelling for children, yung mga ganon. So pwede mo siyang i-incorporate dun sa existing na practice. Ayun. So pwede kang kumuha ng mga relevant na pwede mo pa rin i-reintroduce.
Alright, maraming salamat po. Time check lang po tayo, it's 3:48, so we have space for one last question before we end this session. Follow-up question po to ni Jersky. So, salamat daw po sa inyong mga insights. Okay, tama naman daw na maibalik nga natin sa komunidad itong mga ito. Pero kung ibabalik din po natin sa community, bakit po hindi na lang instead of doing research or documenting their distinct IKSPs, why not capacitate them to do research and document their own IK? So I think this is directed to both speakers.
Yeah. Can I answer the question first?
Go ahead, Wap.
Okay, thank you for the question. Oo, yung sa amin, doon sa aming organization sa SeaWork, meron kaming participatory research method kung saan yung community mismo ay involved doon sa process ng research, from the conceptualization up to yung data gathering. Tapos sa kanila rin naman kasi galing yung information. And then yung information na nagagather namin, it's used doon mismo sa kanilang capacity building program. So yung organizations, they still use the data at saka yung information para i-share doon sa community at para pahusayin pa yung kanilang iba't ibang practices doon.
Hello, ma'am. Okay. Okay po, thank you po kay Sir Jersey. Regarding po dito, actually maganda po siyang idea and then suggestion din. But ito siguro ay nangangailangan ng, yes, of course, kasi yung ating depende sa grupo, yung sa kapasidad, kasi kailangan pa rin naman nila ng assistance, di ba? Doon sa outside o yun sa labas sa grupo nila na like us nga na nagkakandak. Bilang bilang isa sa mga dito, nabuo na, kasi po sa Boracay po kasi isa sa community ng mga ate ay meron po silang nabuong live museum ng mga tribes po nila ng mga ati. Actually, I don't know kung hindi ako nagkakamali, ay parang na-air yata ito sa isang show sa national TV. Yung ina-feature, I mean, is yung talagang sila, yun nandoon at nai-showcase nila kung ano yung mga ginagawa nila even before, tulad ng mga pinagkabuhayan nila, like yung mga medicine nga nila na pag-showcase doon sa kanilang place mismo. So parang dinadayo sila doon para i-witness yung live na museum din nila. Siguro nagkulang lang din is sa proper documentation nila mismo din at hindi ganon na i-promote even dito sa local. Kasi kung tatanungin is limited pa talaga yung understanding, lalo na sa mga kabataan ngayon, about them, about sa culture din nila. So napakaganda po nitong idea para mas lalo pang ma-promote at maging solid pa yung about sa kanila.
Okay, maraming salamat. Yeah, I agree. This is really a long-term project. Okay, so time check po tayo. That's our last question, unfortunately. Kung may mga tanong pa po kayo sa ating mga speakers, baka pwede nyo po silang i-message before nating i-end yung ating session. Tanungin nyo na lang po sila personally. Okay, so may I invite you, okay, may few announcements lang po tayo from the organizers. May we invite you for the day 2 of the ICCS 3. So iniimbitahan po namin kayo na dumalo doon sa ating plenary session which will start at 9 a.m. Okay, followed by the third parallel session at 10:45 a.m. So yung mga links po sa plenary and parallel sessions were resent to you. Okay, so they are in your conference kits and they were also sent to your email. So maraming po salamat sa napaka-informative, thought-provoking na presentations natin ngayon. Thank you kay Mr. Sabangan, kay Director Jaramillo sa pagsagot ng sa mga tanong na natanggap natin ngayong hapon. Marami po talaga kaming natutunan. I really did not only learn a lot, but I also enjoyed a lot. So I hope that's the general sentiment in this panel. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
good afternoon. Thank you.